ahead, please. Sure.
Hello there, Crazy Talks with Wise People once again. This is Mary Angela Tuck, your host for this show. Crazy Talks with Wise People is always known for credible and creditable guests. So this afternoon, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest for today. Um, he is a member of the board of directors at Federation of Philippine Industries. He's also the chairperson of the British Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines for about 10 years now. He's married to a Filipina. That's why he lives in the Philippines and had been serving the Philippines in his capacity as, like what I've said, member of the board of directors of Federation of Philippine Industries and president of the British Chamber of Commerce. With us is Maria Michaela Joseph. She's the research and project officer of the British Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines. Welcome, both of you. Welcome, Maria Michaela, and welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much, and much appreciated to be here. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for your time. And how's the Philippines nowadays, Chris?
Well, we're doing this podcast on a very auspicious day because it's actually election day in the Philippines. In fact,
Yeah.
the polls have just closed, so
Mhm,
we don't have any obviously results yet.
mhm,
But these are what is known as the midterm elections.
mhm,
So it's all of Congress and 12 senator seats, which is
mhm,
half the Senate.
mhm,
And that's actually probably the election that people are looking at because that will see whether how will the administration candidates, because there's obviously a slate from the administration, will fare. Particularly, obviously, in the background is the ongoing politics between President Marcos and, of course, the Dutertes.
mhm.
So we'll see how the voting goes. We'll get, but obviously the nationwide results take longer to tally than local elections. But by tomorrow, we'll have a clear idea how those various candidates have done. But yes, and saying that, is the Philippines a good moment? Yes, but obviously the politics are high at the moment because of the
Yeah,
elections.
right. Um, I think you're facing a national as well as an international issue. How is Trump's tariff affecting Philippine economy?
So I think for the moment, it's not affecting it that much. If you look at the tariffs that were levied on the Philippines, I think it's actually 17%.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
If you look at the Philippines' balance of trade surplus, because obviously the calculations are somewhat difficult to understand, but I think the balance surplus of the Philippines is about $4.8 billion. I mean,
mm-hmm.
it is not particularly high in
Ah,
comparison to others. So
mm-hmm,
if you look at Southeast Asia,
mm-hmm,
highest levies on Vietnam, it's
mm-hmm,
not overly affected. The Philippines, as you're aware, benefits tremendously from business outsourcing.
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
those are not covered by tariffs. What I do think is important for the Philippines is that it now, and I believe that's happening, exploring other trading areas
mm-hmm,
because even though they may not be as adversely affected, obviously, as Vietnam, or if you
mm-hmm,
extend beyond to China,
mm-hmm,
then I think the real issue here is the uncertainty of these tariffs, right? I mean, what will happen? Will they continue?
mm-hmm,
Obviously, we've seen changes very abruptly from the Trump government. So I think in that context, the Philippines needs to explore opportunities within Southeast Asia and wider areas. But in summary, the Philippines is not initially as impacted as others, but of course, it's still an
mm-hmm.
increase.
Mm, thank you for that comprehensive answer. So, what are the key indicators of the local economy and how are they trending?
So, look, the most recent one it will be the GDP figures, which
Mm-hmm,
was for the first quarter, which is about 5.4%.
mm-hmm,
Now, 5.4% growth rate, if you compare it to, say, the UK, will be an outstanding figure. The UK is less than 1%. However, the Philippines will be looking to grow at over 6%. If you look at its context within Southeast Asia, I think only Vietnam is higher. So 5.4 was below what the analysts were looking for, but obviously still relatively strong compared to other countries. More, I think also very importantly, inflation figures fell to 1.4%.
mm-hmm,
Now that's quite important because that gives room for the central bank of the Philippines, known as Banco Central, to cut
mm-hmm,
further interest rates.
mm-hmm,
And the general view now is that the Banco Central will cut rates regardless of the US federal rate.
mm-hmm,
I have to make this point because generally the Philippines would look to see what the US central bank is doing.
mm-hmm,
And the reason for that, of course, is the strong or correlation between the US dollar and the peso.
mm-hmm.
However, the peso has actually strengthened recently and has moved significantly away from a kind of red line of 60 to the dollar.
Yeah.
And so I think with that appreciation and the fact that inflation is improving, that gives room for the central bank to cut rates. So that is very good opportunity when the central bank will by 25 basis points recently. I think the general view is that they will cut again throughout the year, maybe 50 basis points. But I've even seen an estimate that Philippine interest rates could be at 5% by the end of the year. Now, if those reductions go forward, this will be a stimulus to the local economy. So,
Mm,
in summary,
mm, mm,
in growth rate relatively good but lower than expected. Inflation has significantly improved, and this
mm.
gives opportunities for the central bank.
Good news. That's good news.
Indeed.
Wow, GDP is 5.4%. How about the per capita income?
Well, I don't have those figures to hand. That's obviously one of the key factors because if you look at the Philippines, the population is now close to 120 million people.
Mm-hmm,
So it's a very large population.
mm-hmm,
And clearly, the aim of all governments since I've been involved in living there, which is over 20 years, has been to obviously get more of the population to increase more per capita income, to move more of the population out of the poverty trap.
mm-hmm,
That will always be the challenge, right?
mm-hmm.
Um, so I can't give you a definitive answer on that one. Do I think it's improved? Maybe, but that has to be seen by further growth rate, by the economy and the spending, and let's see where it goes.
Mm. Thank you. And what are the
So
main
no,
industries?
can't really say on per capita.
Yeah. What are the main industries driving growth in the Philippines right now?
Okay. So if we look at the main growth areas, I mean, first of all, let's talk about government spending. Government
Mhm.
spending will focus on infrastructure.
Infrastructure, yeah.
Uh, this is clearly a continuous roads, bridges,
Mm,
to some extent, ports and airports.
mm.
The next part of it, and in link to that also, is the government's desire and aim to further increase renewable energy, i.e.,
Oh
the
yeah.
percentage of the total grid that comes from renewable energy. So, renewable energy will be a key focus.
Mm.
It saw one of the largest investments, actually by a British fund in
Ah,
2024.
uh-huh.
So, I think renewable energy will be key, infrastructure will be key.
Mm-hmm.
If I then move it to specifics of the economy, the other aspect I'd say is the Philippines is a relatively young population.
Right.
Um, 50% will be either 25 years or
Yeah,
below.
yeah.
So this actually drives the potential for consumer industry.
Right.
Um, so I think you'll see quite a bit of interest in the consumer sector.
Mm-hmm.
So that will be another area of opportunity for the country. And then, you know, in terms of what the government would like to see,
Mm-hmm.
would like to see further growth in things like Thailand. Thailand probably gets roughly 12 times more visitors than the Philippines.
Uh-huh.
So the Philippines would see itself as an opportunity to benefit from this tourism. The number of visitors to the country has gone up, but it is not in comparison to other
Other
tourist
neighboring
spots such
Asian
as
countries.
Thailand.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
I think the government, well, particularly Thailand stands out because it does so well from tourism. So overall, I think the Philippines, the reason we always stress on infrastructure is that this is considered to be a further boost to the economy. I mean, if you take obviously, and the other area I just would emphasize, which we're sort of supporting, is of course on further extending, you know, internet or transmission rights called the Open Transmission Act,
Mm-hmm.
because that will further help in terms of communications. We're also supporting something called the E-Governance Act,
Mm-hmm.
because what we want to see is more approvals online.
Mm-hmm.
And the other area, which I think is a great opportunity for the Philippines, is in cybersecurity, because that's going to be a need,
Yeah.
whether it's in the Philippines or any of the developed world, that's
Right.
growing.
Yes.
So those are the sort of key sectors.
Mm-hmm.
And we're optimistic that with, obviously, as we talked about in the other question, with the interest rates potentially going to come down, this
Mm-hmm.
gives the opportunity to invest more in the economy.
Oh, that's good news. How about if, I've got some friends here who would like to invest in the Philippines, um, in terms of maybe aquaculture, um, ecotourism, real estate. Um, yeah, I think those are some key interests, among my friends around. Would you advise them to invest this time? Ecotourism, aquaculture.
Yeah, I mean, I would, yes, there are opportunities, but I also have to be very candid. The Philippines is not the easiest country to deal with. Bureaucracy, red tape
Yes.
is there.
Mm.
Um, so, for example, there has been set up since the previous administration. That says there was, I think, is a department called the anti-red tape,
Mm.
and we're actually an anti-red tape champion or a champion of that department.
Mm.
So I always say to people when they want to invest in the Philippines, you have to be relatively cautious because of the the bureaucracy. And let's not forget, we have both national and local laws. So
Right.
they call them local government units,
Mhm.
LGUs. There are also restrictions. So if you take real estate, only Filipinos can own land under
Mhm.
the Constitution. Uh, Foreigners can own condominiums, but that's only in the ratio of 60-40.
Mhm.
So, for example, if there's 100 units, in theory, 40 units can be owned, or 40% can be owned by foreigners, the other 60% by Filipinos. So there is a restriction on land. In terms of, so overall, if I look at these things, what we as the British Chamber tend to encourage when we get people who are
Mhm.
interested, if they want to sell a particular or working with them, we try to guide them to get a reliable Filipino partner,
Right. So would you be
because
able to provide
the
them
the
with some help just in case they
well,
need?
we do work. Yeah, we do work with that. I mean, it's a service we offer. I want to be very
Mhm.
clear. We also charge for the service in the sense if we have to go and find distributors or so forth. But yes, we can. I think the Philippines is while I think there's opportunity to grow, and we've seen it, it is a country which requires a thorough analysis if it's your first time. If it's not like, you buy,
Mm,
particularly in terms of real
mm,
estate, right? Because of the restrictions.
mm.
And let's not forget the economy in itself, the constitution has restrictions.
Yeah.
Um, that's written into the
Mm-hmm.
Constitution of 1987.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we've seen some liberalisation, but as the British Chamber of Commerce, along with other business groups, we'd like to see further liberalisation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But well, given the right partner, I think, given the right partner, given the right connections, you know how it is, the right partner, right connections in the Philippines, I think businesses
Yeah,
really
correct.
thrive, right? Yeah, we thrive by connections, pulling strings. I think that's how
I
it
agree.
works here. So can you pull strings with
Yeah,
them?
I
I mean,
think.
can you pull strings for them? Of course,
Ah,
yes. British Chamber. Yeah. British Chamber. You can call people. You can call
well,
people.
we wouldn't say pulling strings. We have connections, but even so, I'd say, Mary, I think that the Philippines, in my 20 years, has it grown? It has grown. It continues to present opportunities. And we well, look, we will always advocate to the government, as we constantly stress, you need to further liberalize because other countries are obviously, you don't operate in isolation. And if
Yes.
we want people to invest in the Philippines, and we do, then we also try to stress them the opportunities to go and look at the rest of Southeast Asia. And,
Mhm.
you have to look at what other countries are doing, right?
Yeah.
So there are opportunities, but there needs to be further liberalization of the economy.
Uh-huh. I, well, I think there's so much potential also in Philippine tourism. It's just that I think, just correct me if I'm wrong, Chris. I think the government is not investing so much on PR, unlike Thailand. Thailand is investing so much on PR, promoting, promoting their beaches, promoting their tourist destinations, educating. Well, you don't need to educate people on hospitality because I think it's innate in us to be hospitable. But um, I think that's what I'm seeing in the Philippines. Do you agree with me?
Yes, to some extent. I think the Philippine government needs, and I've said this, I mean, if you look at the UK,
Mm,
I think it's fairly clear that a lot of countries have a very consistent approach.
mm-hmm.
Delegations, people coming.
Mm.
The Philippines does do it, and we work closely with the Philippine embassy and
Mm-mm.
the trade
Yes.
office there. But
Yeah.
we would like to see it on a regular basis. Now, if I come
Mm-hmm.
back to tourism, one of the challenges that the Philippines has is, of course, infrastructure. Now, let me explain what I mean there is that,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to go to some of the best beaches, they are there, but, has the transport, is it a smooth, journey to get there, right? And I think they're always trying to look at ways to improve that because
Mm-hmm.
that's Thailand's advantage, right? And I think that's also one of the ways because if you look at Thailand, yes, they promote themselves very well. They've done
They do. Mm.
extremely well, and
Even India.
congratulations to them.
Yeah. Even
But it's also
Vietnam.
sort of
Mm.
it's also based around a lot of things. Correct. You go to Thailand, there's tourism police, there is a setup, the infrastructure is, designed to get you from A to B quickly. The Philippines has certainly had challenges in that respect. For example, if you want to go to Boracay, you have to take a plane, then you
Mm.
have to take a taxi,
Mm.
pedicab to get to the port. Then there's a port right across. You have to enter at one specific area, and then you can get to your. Then you've got to take another ride to get to your hotel. So
Mm.
does that put people off? I mean, if you want to have a lot of tourism, you have to also significantly work, which is going on. If you take Manila Airport, um, that's now, I think, being run. I think the bid was won by San Miguel, so San Miguel Infrastructure, and I'm sure they're already starting to look at trying to make changes to improve those terminals, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's Terminal 1, 2, or 3, right? And as we often said, the first thing you see of a country is when you enter is the airport.
The airport, yes.
That's your first view.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's a combination of infrastructure, improving the opportunities, and yes, then promoting them to be able to
Yeah.
compete and
Yes.
take an increasing share of that tourism.
Right. And consistency. I agree with you. Consistency. Yes. Um,
Mm.
if you were the president of the Philippines, what are you going to do? Oh, well, you already said it, right? So if you were the president, that's just what you're going to do. Thank you, Chris. Um, now going back to other industries like tourism, I think another industry in the Philippines that is not being taken care of is agriculture. Agriculture and aquaculture. I think because the Philippines is an archipelago, we are surrounded with surrounded with water. So I think the Philippines should develop systems on aquaculture, improve aquaculture and
Yeah, so the
improve
Philippines,
farming.
I agree. So if you look at, let's just talk farming and agriculture first.
Mm-hmm,
So the Philippines has had significant challenges. If I link it back
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
to inflation, which
Yeah.
has come down,
Mm-hmm,
um, the inflation spiked. Why?
mm-hmm,
Well, the principle was number one is rice, which is the staple diet.
mm-hmm.
The Philippines is not self-sufficient
Oh,
in
really?
rice, would need to import primarily from Vietnam and Thailand. Yes, I mean they grow as a percentage itself, but it's not self-sufficient. The other area which we know very closely is on meat and meat products.
Mm,
Now, the one of the preferred meats in the Philippines is pork.
mm,
And we know this specifically. So the pig herds of the Philippines have been hit by the African swine fever,
mm.
ASF, and estimated those herds are down about 50%
Oh, no.
because of. Well, the other thing you got to look at is that farming in the Philippines, there is some commercial farming, but a lot of it is small lots, small farmers.
Mm,
And that's very difficult to control when you have ASF because you have to actually, unfortunately, slaughter the affected pigs, which of course affects income and so forth. So why do I make these points? The government has managed to get the inflation down. Food is a key driver of that index, and that's by liberalizing imports.
mm,
All right.
mm, mm,
Now,
mm,
we also had meetings with the Secretary of Agriculture
mm.
and, well, the Philippines, and we supported the legislation because also the Philippines suffers from, smuggling. So one of the things that we have advocated for was the passage of the Anti-Agricultural Economic Sabotage Act,
Mhm.
which was linked to smuggling. Because
Yeah.
while we want to assist British exporters of pork,
Mm,
they only work, of course, with legitimate importers and not anybody who is not in that category. So,
mm,
look, the law was passed. We think this will further help the agricultural sector,
mhm.
but the agricultural sector will need obviously continuing support. And they've also brought down, obviously, the tariffs, just to bring it back,
Yeah, yeah.
on the importation of rice,
Mhm.
but also they lowered the tariffs on pork, for example,
Mm,
specifically.
mm,
So, to give you
mhm,
one final example, for the Philippines, the
mhm.
UK, it's the UK's fourth largest market in the world for
Yeah.
pork exports.
Mm,
So agriculture. Now, if I come now to the aquaculture, the
Mm-hmm.
fishing area,
Mm-hmm.
that is actually a lot of potential. Um, the Philippines does have obviously great opportunities because it's an archipelago.
Mm-hmm.
Again, some of those fishings is already, I think, commercially contracted, particularly to exports to Japan and China, I
Mm-hmm.
think. So there are opportunities in these areas. The key in terms of agriculture, particularly, will be how do you support small farming landowners, right? Because obviously the question then is commercial lots, efficiencies. And the other thing I can aware of is actually the use of water.
Mm-hmm.
So the Philippines, as we know, is affected by typhoons, heavy
Oh
rainfalls
yeah,
over
yeah.
specific months.
Mm-hmm.
But the question then is that water captured? You know, what is the
Yeah,
dam system?
yeah.
And part of that is that issue. So
Mm-hmm.
the government has recognized that. I mean, President Marcos, I think for about a year and a half, was actually the Secretary of Agriculture, along as being secretary, along as well as being president of the country. He's now appointed Secretary Laurel, who
Mm-hmm.
comes from a background.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there is a lot of focus on agriculture. I think you're totally correct. But it will take a long time. So I put this into context of politics. I mean, President Marcos is halfway through his 6 year term. So he has a remaining 3 years as of as of next month, right? Because it
Mm-hmm.
starts in June. Um, will they make changes? Yes, I think they will support agriculture, but it's going to be hard to make a lot of changes in 3 years, specifically on things like agriculture, because it's a
You
slow,
know,
not a slow process, but it takes time. But in all credit, I think they've moved fast to bring down food prices, which they did through liberalizing the import sector by also looking at what they can do locally. And that, of course, will have an additional benefit to be, as we've discussed, reduce the interest rate. So agriculture is linked to that.
I'm just wondering really because the one of the best schools in agricultural schools in the entire Asia is Iri. It's in UP Los Baños. It's in the Philippines.
Correct.
In fact, Iri was the one who taught Vietnam and Thailand how to do farming. And I don't know, this was like a visit to Erie, maybe what, 8 years ago. And I think one of the professors told us that even Vietnam and Thailand still get their seedlings from Erie. So if it's
Yeah, they
true
do. I mean,
until now, how come we
I think they
cannot
do get
develop our
seeds.
own?
Well, we can. I mean, the other issue is that the Thailand, and Vietnam are naturally suited to grow a lot of rice because of the Mekong Delta, the way it works.
Mhm.
The Philippines has challenges, particularly
With irrigation.
through that use of water. You know,
Yeah,
control
irrigation.
irrigation is
Yeah.
critical.
Mhm.
So,
Uh-huh.
could it grow more? Yes. Will it become self-sufficient in rice? That's a very significant challenge. I mean, I've been there 20 years, and it's not been close to
Yeah,
self-sufficiency.
I understand. Okay, so about you know what about aquaculture, and you were saying about typhoon and so on. I have a friend from Mauritius, and they are now starting aquaculture in the middle of the ocean, but it's really high tech, very very high
Oh,
tech. I will send you the brochure, and if you're interested, I'll link you up with this person. You might want to introduce it to the Philippines. Fishing in the middle of the ocean, um, no mortalities because you don't anymore need fishermen. It's like
mm.
they'll be doing some infrastructures way up there, and then no more fishermen needed. It's all by machine AI and everything. It's very impressive. I hope the Philippines can adapt that. I would like to introduce this guy to you. You might want to take a look at it.
Oh,
Sure.
please.
Yeah, I will. I will. Okay. He's
Sure,
Jewish.
send it.
Yes, he's
Please send
Jewish,
it to
but
me,
he
girl.
is launching his
Okay.
first project in Mauritius. And while I was looking at the brochure, I was thinking like, oh yeah, we're um, you know, Sarangani and so on. They've got really even in Sulu, Zamboanga, all these coastal cities, they do have really delicious fishes. And if we can, we will have an oversupply of that. And if we can export that to other countries, that would be a very big help to the Philippine economy. And by the way, Chris, can you
I agree.
encourage the people there to export? I've been like going around groceries here, and I wouldn't even see a single Filipino food. You only see Thai food, Indian food, Vietnamese food, but there's no Filipino food. And I was thinking, our food is not inferior. Our food is not inferior. How come nothing is on sale? I mean, nothing is
Yeah, I mean,
for
there are.
sale on on the I mean in rather in the department stores or in the groceries here. You name it,
Yeah,
Sainsbury, Tesco, Co-op, nothing. No
it
Filipino.
was very limited. There are a few, and there are a few
No,
Filipino
nothing
restaurants
here.
in
We're in the
London.
countryside, so nothing.
In Scotland, maybe.
Yeah.
No, no. I mean, and the other thing I'd say is that if I bring it back specifically to the UK government or the UK and the Philippines. So when the UK left the EU, which was the end of 2020, that was the
Yes.
official
Mm-hmm.
departure.
Mm-hmm.
The Philippines, they rolled over their existing trade agreement, which is
Mm-hmm.
called GSP Plus. That's what they trade with the EU on.
Ah.
And then approximately 2 years ago, they've now moved to what they call the Developing Countries Tariff Scheme,
Mm-hmm.
known as TCTS,
Mm-hmm.
DCTS.
Mm-hmm.
And this actually brings opportunities for the Philippines. I think about 90% of all goods
Mm-hmm.
would be tariff free,
Mm-hmm.
approximately. So, yes, there are opportunities, but that needs to accelerate. Um, and let's not forget, I mean, the estimates of the embassy, I will see tomorrow, the Philippine embassy, is that there are approximately 250,000 Filipinos in the UK. Now,
Yes.
to clarify, obviously, a lot of those Filipinos are now, the matter will be British citizens, they'll have
Yeah.
their citizenship, some will
Right.
be born here,
Yeah.
but they still, align to the Philippines. They
Right.
still look to the Philippines. They still have
Mm.
family and friends
Mm.
and ties. So, there are opportunities, and I think the UK government and the Philippine government has just further increased its relations. Um, they've moved to what they call a joint economic committee. So this is another level of
Mm.
further trade involvement, right? Which is a
Mm.
good sign.
Mm.
It's not the level of a full free trade agreement,
Mm.
but that still shows the opportunities. The Philippines and the UK, for the UK, the Philippines is like number 60 in terms of its trade activity, right?
Yeah.
In the world,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So while that's obviously relatively small, it is growing. And I think the total trade between the two countries is about £2.9 billion. So
Mm.
we've got opportunities, but we can do more.
Yes, of course. Yes. I hope so. I hope so. All right. So, are there any other things that you would like to convey to our audience? Most of our viewers in this podcast are business people. Um,
Yeah, I'd say the following, if I may. So, first of all, thank you for the time.
oh, I should
It's very
thank you.
kind.
I should
I
thank you.
the the Philippines is, I can honestly say I've been going to the country since 1985.
Mm-hmm.
Have been living there since 2003. There have been distinct improvements. Now, number one, I would say this is a country worth visiting.
Yeah.
If you go to Southeast Asia, we
Mm-hmm.
appreciate it's a long way from the UK. I think the economy has grown well. It's recovered from COVID, which
Mm-hmm.
was actually economically, yeah, a significant impact in the Philippines.
Mm.
That has now recovered significantly well, particularly
Thank
certain
you.
sectors which were badly affected,
Mm.
transport,
Mm.
certain areas, because of course there was no movements. Um, the Philippines, I think, opportunity to grow beyond the 5.4%, which I've
Mm.
referred to in the first quarter,
Mm-hmm.
is a distinct possibility, particularly with lowered interest rates.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yes, we cannot rule out that tariffs or US policy as an overhang across the world.
Mm.
Um, and the main issue, I think, for a lot of people is the uncertainty. Is it this? Is it that?
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
very hard to plan.
Mm.
In that context, the Philippines, encouraged by us, we'd like them to look at other areas for
Mm.
trading. So, for example, the UK
Mm.
belongs to a thing called CPTPP, which is a basically trans consultative
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
partnership.
Mm-hmm.
The Philippines is now looking at as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the Philippines is also part of RCEP, which is a very large Southeast Asian trading bloc. So
Mm-hmm.
I think to people, one, the Philippines is an opportunity.
It
Two,
is. Mm-hmm.
um, if you need advice or you want opportunities, you have a specific product, I would particularly say come to the chamber. Mika will always try to help. And while I think there's opportunities, I also want to be very candid and say there are challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as long as you go in the right preparation, I think those can be overcome. But the final thing I say, and I always say this to people, is for me, the Philippines is about a long term. It's about long term relationships, about long term investment, and you'll get benefits.
Mm.
It is not a short term.
Mm.
So if
Mm.
it's short term, I would say you may be elsewhere. If you're looking at the
Mm.
longer term, there are opportunities, right?
You're right.
Because initially there will be some degree of frustrations. But look, I think the country's set to grow, and I think the population is continuing. While it is not maybe at the levels of growth it was in the 60s and 70s, it's certainly growing more significantly than a lot of other countries. And
Mm.
that alone will reinforce it's young and dynamic. So please, and if you want assistance, we'll try to. And the British Chamber is here to grow business between the two countries.
Yes, and for sure, Chris from the British Chamber of Commerce will be able to help. You've been in the Philippines for 20 years. What I've noticed in the Philippines is that you have to connect with a local. Well, Chris is like a local already because he's been in the Philippines for 20 years. So he knows the ropes. So just connect with the British Chamber of Commerce and they will help you facilitate all those papers and everything. And I think you're in good hands with the British Chamber of Commerce, with the leadership of Chris, of course. Yeah.
Well, you're very kind. So thank you very much. Does that, I think that
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much for gracing the show. Thank you, Maria, Joseph, for helping us out today. And well, I hope there'll be a lot of people investing in the Philippines with your help, Chris.
Well, look, once again, thank you for the time you've given us. Congratulations on your podcast, on your program. And we're here to assist. And I'd like to wish anybody who's listening today, whether or not in the Philippines, I wish you all the success possible and a very, very bright rest of 2025 and beyond. Thank you very
You're
much
very
and have a good
kind.
day to everybody.
Yes, you're very kind, and I'm so honored to have met you and to have interviewed you on my podcast. Same was true with Maria Joseph. Thank you to both of you, and I hope to see you in the Philippines. And you're welcome to come over to Scotland.
Okay, bye. Take
Bye.
care. Bye bye now.
Bye bye. Bye
Thank you very
now.
much. Bye
Thank you
bye.
too. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye bye.